Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. There are some people who make a claim that Islam doesn't recognize the station of women, that Islam actually takes from the status of women and doesn't grant them the type of status that they truly deserve. We believe that Islam grants them the status that they deserve and doesn't take them above where they deserve, like it grants men the status that they deserve and doesn't take them above where they should be. And we know this from many different angles. We know that the Prophet ﷺ encouraged the status of the woman by saying to the individual who asked the Prophet ﷺ, who is the most deserving individual to have good companionship of mine, O Prophet ﷺ? The Prophet ﷺ said, your mother, your mother, your mother. Then he said, your father. So he encouraged the status of women in that case. And he actually made her elevated above the man, because there's many sacrifices that the mother has to make in order for the child to be born, in order for the child to be raised, in order for the child to be nourished, and so forth. Similarly, in other cases, the Prophet ﷺ may say things which may be to the advantage of a man, because that circumstance dictates that. This is the natural balance that Islam comes to organize and recognize as well. But some people who I would say are a bit cynical perhaps, and sometimes maybe not cynical as well, maybe they have good intentions, but they don't have perhaps the knowledge and understanding to be able to understand otherwise. They may take some statements of the Prophet ﷺ out of context and say that this particular statement is an evidence that Islam doesn't recognize the status of women. I'll give you one example. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that I have not seen anyone who is more defective in intellect and religion, more capable of outsmarting a man who himself is very intelligent than one of you. Now, pause here and stop. Firstly, when it comes to the defect in religion, the Prophet ﷺ, he described this and he said that refers to a woman not having the obligation to pray and not having the obligation to fast when she happens to be within her hayd. This is a defect, meaning this is almost a concession. So we have to translate the word defect over here as a concession. The Arabs have a tendency of doing that. Sometimes they use similar words for a meaning which is close to it. Okay, especially if they're trying to say two things at the same time. For example, I'll tell you in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ تَبَوَّأُوا الدَّارَ وَالْإِيمَانَ. Those people who ended up living in the city of Medina and also inside of Iman. Do people live inside of Iman? No. But Allah was trying to say those people who live in Medina and those people who the Iman lives in their heart. But he said it the other way around. So the Arabs have many linguistic instruments. Without understanding that, you may misunderstand a statement of the Prophet ﷺ. So similarly here, the Prophet ﷺ is not saying there's a defect in the religion. He's saying that the person has a concession which otherwise men don't have. Now let me ask you, does any woman want to get rid of this concession? Well, obviously less burden. Then most women will say, actually, you know what, I'm going through difficulty already, it's okay, I don't want to do this. That's the first part. The second part is, what about the intellect? What about the intellect? Is a woman truly defective in the intellect? Well, in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ is speaking of two different types of intellects. He's speaking of aql and he's speaking of lub. So he's saying that a woman, despite her defect in aql, in a form of intellect, and I'll explain what it is, she ends up outsmarting a man. So he's actually establishing for her intelligence in a very, very rhetorically powerful way, that despite some weakness within a form of intellect, she's able to outsmart a man. Now, the question here is that in the modern context, how do we understand that? And based on modern findings, how do we understand that? Well, based on modern findings, we find that, neurological findings that is, that a man has certain types of intelligences, or a certain type of intelligence in which he is superior to women. But likewise, a woman has a certain type of intelligence in which she is actually superior to man. So when it comes to emotion and emotional intelligence, a woman is stronger than a man. And this is something that is established within research. There's a lot of research behind this. If you need to search it up, just look it up on Google and you'll find it. emotional intelligence and the superiority of women within that. Now, I want to flip the table and the discussion and turn the tables on the people that use this hadith to try to claim that Islam doesn't recognize the status of a woman, and say this hadith is actually a miracle from among the miracles of the Prophet ﷺ. How so? How did the Prophet ﷺ know, without the type of neurological research that we have today, that a woman is actually more emotionally intelligent and superior than man 1400 years ago? That is, of course, through the wahi that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given to the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ, he proved to us within this hadith yet again that the statements that come out of the mouth of the Prophet ﷺ are but truth. Maybe some people may not be able to understand that truth, but that means there's a defect within the understanding of the person and not within the statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.